So I think for many people walking out of the Elusive Samurai episode 4, there's going to be a lot of talk about the 3D CGI that was in this episode for a good chunk of it. And I think we do have to look at it from both ends of this debate. Because at the end of the day, if you have been paying attention, there has been rumblings about behind the scenes issues with this show. That it is a strenuous production and there is going to be noticeable bumps the longer we watch the show. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we also most likely all know that stuff like animating horses is a lot more challenging. So if you have two characters on horses doing archery, it's understandable why 3D would most likely be the way it has to go. But then you can also argue, well, it's clear they didn't have time to polish up a lot of it. And then there's going to be debate about people saying, well, actually, it looks fine, it's just noticeable. There's a lot to dive into. The big question is, should we be concerned about the production going forward after seeing just how much they had to use the 3D in such a noticeable way? And right now, I would say no. Mainly because the majority of this episode looks like what we've seen over the past 3. I think if the production was truly crashing and burning, there would be a lot more noticeable, smaller details throughout this episode prior to the big archery debacle. Now, I'm not saying people can't have issues with the 3D. I'm not saying people can't point out how obvious the 3D looked, but at the end of the day, I don't think this is a sign of the production completely crashing and burning. To get to that point, we would need to have way more of the episode outside of the archery look god-awful or noticeably at a decline, which I don't think we're at. I do believe, like most anime productions, this one is struggling because most anime productions do struggle. Episodes are finished hours, if not, if you're lucky, a day before it broadcasts. This is no exception. But I don't think we're at a point yet that we have to be worried that this is going to be an unfinished mess. But I do understand that the anime community, when they see a whiff of 3D, is going to get upset. For me, very noticeable, but I was expecting something like this would happen sooner rather than later, but time will tell. Luckily, it's still a very enjoyable episode, if not creepy as hell, because what the hell was with those eyes? Now, of course, I do have full live reactions over on Patreon. If you want to see my full and good thought to any of these Elusive Samurai episodes, it's going to be over there exclusively. So, this is an interesting episode because the whole idea of having a character who runs away, obviously he can't actually run away forever. There's going to be things like, well, in episode 2 when he cut that man's head off, right? But the idea that he's much more skilled with a bow than he is with a sword. So we need to find him a teacher to harness and hone and make his skills with a bow even better. And in comes this man who, I have so many questions, because not only is the one dude have like 6 eyeballs in one, what in demon possession is that? This man's, he's bug-eyed lizard man. Like, his eyes like literally are bulging out. It's like if he's Mr. Fantastic and he could stretch his eyeballs. What is wrong with this dude? And then when he says he's gonna get us a deer, and then he just, for whatever reason, shoots the shrine maiden in the ear? Like, what's wrong with this dude? And this has to be one of the funniest things that I've seen this season. Our boy is having like a panic attack in the tent. No one knows what's going on. And it's funny because like 2 minutes before this, I'm thinking to myself, this is literally animal abuse. Like, this is so cruel. They're hitting dogs. Like, yeah, sure, they're not actually shooting them to, like, death, but you're breaking their ribs for this event. Like, shooting a dog at that close of a range with a full-ass bow, like, you're puncturing and ripping shit. Like, it's not good. And he's basically saying, in the future, this is going to be considered animal abuse. This is so bad. I'm going to be in so much trouble. My boy's worried about getting canceled. And I'm like, I'm literally just talking about this. And he's saying the thing out loud. That's hilarious. But what's interesting is the event's basically like, okay, so you shoot the dogs, different, I imagine certain ones might be worth more than the other. But when they have this competition against each other, it's like, okay, if you shoot the body parts of your opponent, it's like worth 5 points or something like that. And our boy gets clobbered in the head, like he's bleeding. And he's a crazy bastard. In episode 2, actually, if you look at episode 1, episode 2, like anytime his life's in danger, it's like that adrenaline goes and he's a completely different person. He's him, he can do more crazy things. His aim's probably going to get better in this case. He zones in, he has a Jimmy Neutron brain blast moment, and there's something about the thrill that just turns him into a psychopath. Now, the interesting thing is because we're in such a public setting, we're clearly not killing this guy right now, and I'm interested to see because what I said when we took out in episode 2 that crazy bastard. I was like, you know, this dude was such a good villain because he had that psycho energy. He had that very demonic, like, Jesus Christ, like, where's Chris Hansen when you need us? But then you make it even worse. You make it even worse with this dude. And we're, you know, the whole idea of basically observing and not letting him see us and learning his skills with the archery so that we can use it for ourselves. At some point, we have to shoot this man down. But I don't see it happening anytime soon, given that our first interaction with him properly is in such a public setting, and they're obviously not using real arrows, right? They're using ones without a sharp head on the arrow part. So I don't know where they want to go with this, because it almost feels like the first season's all about, like, you know, getting him trained, showing him different things, different teachers. Some people will die along the way, of course, as they're setting up, you know, where, like, the proper, like, this is just like the intro arc, and I really do feel like they want to do that for the first season of this. And if we get lucky to see a season 2, that's when armies and so many crazy things could happen. There's still room for possibility of having miniature battles, miniature army situations before the season ends, but given just how much of an emphasis it's put on teaching and building him up, because he really was being raised as a puppet leader. Sure, certain things like archery he was good at, but for the most part, he's very inexperienced and not fit for battle, if not leading a nation. So there's a lot of stuff he has to do, right? But in general, though, this was a very creepy episode. The eyes and just the demonicness of not knowing what the hell we're dealing with. Like I said, I think it was in my second video I did for this show. It was either the second or third. I mentioned how the extreme faces, you know, for some anime fans, especially in modern day, it's not as widely accepted as it used to be even a decade ago. But the over-the-topness for me, it just is either I just want to backhand sometimes these faces, or I'm like, that is the creepiest thing ever. And I think it just kind of works for the art style they're going with, and that constant shift just makes for some unexpected moments for me. I do think the 3D was very noticeable. However, I don't think it was bad. I do think overall it was well animated. It just, sometimes it blended in well, and then for the most part, it was like, that was very noticeable. But hopefully most people will come out at least saying it's noticeable, but it wasn't bad, because if we can have a universal opinion like that, then I think the hype around the show shouldn't die out too much. But I do think there will be a lot of doom and gloom about this episode just because of that. But I do think we have to consider just how difficult a scene like that would be to animate strictly hand-drawn, on top of how strenuous we know the anime production side of things is. So overall, I don't think this spells complete doom and gloom. But obviously we should keep a close eye just to see if there's some patterns about how things are happening. Right now, I think this was just a situation that needed to be 3D, but I don't think it spells disaster just yet, but that's just me. Of course, those are my feelings. Let me know your thoughts down below. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Of course, ring that bell, and like I mentioned, we got those full live reactions over on Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. Alright, so today we got Tricon King, Matthew Nugan, Carlos Henkrit, Kyle Williams 12, and we also have Kai Hoverman. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care, and you all have a good one.